Good morning and welcome to this week's Grow, where we gather to recharge, organize, and work here as members of MWEG. We are so glad that you are joining us today. We have some leaders from our advocacy areas here at MWEG to give us an update on each of their areas and give us a preview of what they will be working on and towards for 2024. And so we're going to jump right into it and start with Jessica Larson, who is our advocacy director over our Protect Democracy. So I'm going to just have her go in and tell us what she's been working on, maybe what some of the chapters have been working on, whatever she wants to share.
Thanks, Rachel. Hi, everyone. This has been a really good year for democracy building. We've engaged in several important pro-democracy initiatives and advocacy work, and I'm happy to share them with you. Generally speaking, we've spent a significant amount of time this year talking with and learning from a myriad, just a ton of different people and different organizations in the pro-democracy movement, and really trying to study out and analyze and be thoughtful about the most productive uses of our efforts, and especially of your efforts and your time. To that end, we've engaged in several areas and spent a lot of time developing our strategy and our game plan for this very important upcoming election year. And I want to spend just a second to talk about the election season, because I think we think about our elections often when we think about democracy. And we see this year really as a crucial opportunity to really rally voters and potentially gain their interest in ways that we don't always have their interest, because democracy work can be difficult to grasp because we don't always feel it necessarily in our lives. We can't always see it the way that we can see other types of advocacy work. But it's so important, because if our structures aren't working, then it makes it very difficult for us to advocate in any area if our representatives aren't really representing the will of the people. So that's what we're working on. We know that we don't really know who's going to be on the presidential ballot yet, but it's really clear that many people are discouraged at the deterministic nature of our party politics, and really uninspired by the candidates that it's elevating. So this is our opportunity. So this year we've done a couple things around these ideas. One of them is we've spent a lot of time learning about how primary and caucus systems work. And we learned that over 95% on an aggregate level of federal elections are really determined at the primary level. And this is really for two reasons, and this is what we're working on. One is gerrymandering, and this is because our districts are so heavily favored one party or the other. The only real election of consequence in many places is the primary, because the opposing party, just the numbers, they don't have a chance. And so that's something we're really working on, because primaries they have very low voter turnout. And so what you're really saying is that a very small portion of one party is determining who is winning the entire general election. And so we're working on that. They call this the primary problem, if you're interested in reading more about it. And the other reason that the primaries are deterministic is because many primaries are closed primaries. And what that means is only people that are registered with a specific party can vote in a primary, and usually that party's primary. And this is an issue because right now, people are unsure how they feel about parties. Independent voters in our country, people who are registered as unenrolled or unaffiliated, represent a majority of voters within our country. And so these people are locked out of participating in the primary election, which is this very important election. And so the reason why this is important is because it means that our representatives while they may be great people, aren't necessarily incentivized to represent all of us, because they only really need to represent the people in the interests of those who are electing them, which is the small portion of voters. And so we're really working on trying to open up the primaries, open up the elections, so that people can participate in a fair and meaningful way. And here are a couple ways that we're doing that. As you guys know, those who have been following MWEG, we're involved in some really important gerrymandering litigation that's happening. And we had our lawsuit was heard in the summer, and we're just waiting to hear back on the ruling on that. And just as a reminder, that legislation basically challenged the Utah legislature's overruling a citizen passed ballot initiative that would have called for an independent redistricting commission, and it's which would have helped with some of the gerrymandering issues that are happening in Utah right now. And so we're waiting for the ruling on that. And that brings up another area that we're really working on, and that we're going to work on the defensive and the offense on, and that is with ballot initiatives. So right now, our Idaho chapter has done a great job and has joined a coalition there to open the primaries in Idaho. And it's a ballot initiative, and they've been gathering signatures. They've had several press coverage. They're doing a lot of work to help open the primaries there. And we're working on that in a couple other places too, also in Pennsylvania, that has a closed primary system, locks out about 1 million voters, registered voters. Also Nebraska and possibly Arizona and Nevada. And so we're going to continue our work on the ballot initiatives, and we have a toolkit put together to help recognize when the legislature is trying to restrict the ability of citizens to participate in ballot initiatives. And so we're heavily focused on that. And as always, with the legislative sessions coming up, we'll be a little bit on the defensive. And our chapter leaders are great at parsing out what we need to spend our time on. But as I was thinking about this, I was remembering anyone who's played any sports has had a coach that's told them that the best defense is a good offense. And I looked this up, and I was interested to find out that it was actually, the idea came from George Washington, who at one time said that offensive operations are the surest defense sometimes. And I really like this because at MWEG we wholeheartedly believe this, and we advocate not just in the defense when things aren't looking how we want them to look, but we are also fierce advocates in a strong offense in advocating for policies that will increase participation and fairness and equity within our democracy. So that's a quick, maybe not so quick recap of protecting democracy. And we're always looking for volunteers. If anyone wants to join our team, we'd love to have you. Thanks. I'm going to pass it off to Cristie.
Thanks, Jessica. So I'm Cristie, and I am the Advocacy Director over Environment and Sustainability. So just a couple of our highlights for this year. One of the more visible things we worked on was the Advocacy National Monument in Nevada. Our Nevada chapter was really involved in advocating for the National Monument designation for a couple of years, and it was finally designated officially earlier this year in the spring. And it was really exciting. It's a really beautiful piece of land there in Clark County. Really important to a lot of the Native American tribes in the area, and also provides a really nice wildlife corridor connecting public lands in other states. So we were really excited about that, and that was something our Nevada chapter has worked on for a really long time. Another thing we did this year is early in the year, we pretty frequently participate in hearings and open meetings at the Arizona Corporation Commission, which is the regulatory body in Arizona that works on energy utility rates and energy policy. And we'd been involved with them for quite some time and had noticed that the open meeting process was not very accommodating to members of the public and people whose job it was not to show up there, mainly paid lobbyists or people who are in the industries, when the meetings were supposed to be for the purpose of gathering comments from the public. So Cristie Black, one of our Arizona chapter leaders, wrote an op-ed asking for some changes to the open meeting policies, the way that they were run, to make them more accommodating to members of the public who wanted to participate. And we immediately got a call from one of the commissioners and had a meeting, and the commissioner was also concerned with some of these issues and working on implementing some changes to the open meeting structure to make it more accommodating to the public. So that was a really exciting development that we were able to kind of throw our weight behind, making government more accessible to the people of Arizona and allowing them to have a easier entry to participating in some of these energy meetings. So those were a couple of the more visible things we did this year. Some of the more kind of behind the scenes things we've done is we have continued to work with the Arizona Corporation Commission as well as the Public Utility Commission in Nevada, commenting on energy rate cases and energy policy cases in both of those states. And we've also commented on a few solar cases, talking about whether how solar power should be metered and what sort of incentives are available for residential solar. And we've also established connections in the Arizona Office of Resiliency. That is, it's essentially their Office of Energy. It's a little bit broader than that, but it was just brought back this year by Arizona's governor. And a lot of what they do is implement federal legislation. So funding that becomes available, for example, under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act or the IRA, and other federal acts, gets sent to the states if they have a plan and show what they're going to do with it. So that's a lot of what the Office of Resiliency does. And so we've kind of been communicating with them on certain funding opportunities and programs we'd like to see implemented there, using the federal funding that's available from laws that are passed on the federal level. So going forward in the next year, we will continue with that. There is still a lot of programs to be rolled out under those federal laws, and we will continue to kind of keep an eye on that and make sure that governments and businesses and whoever the money is intended for is aware that they can apply for it, and then that the money is used in the way that it's intended to be used. So just making sure, this is kind of the other side of advocacy, is the laws in place. They we're not advocating for it in the legislature anymore because it's established, but now we're taking it and making sure that it's implemented the way that it's supposed to be implemented, and that there's transparency and that there's public input and that all the stakeholders can be involved in how this money is used. And then the other thing, obviously, is in the spring, we have quite a few states going into their legislative sessions, as Jessica mentioned. And so we'll be working, especially in Utah, Arizona, and Nevada, which is where we tend to focus a lot of our environmental work anyway. But in those states, we're looking forward to working on some bills specifically pertaining to air quality, water conservation, and land conservation as the opportunities arise. And as Jessica said, sometimes we'll be on the offensive. Sometimes we see bills that really would be detrimental to the environment we live in and the air we breathe. So we can react to those, but hopefully, and I anticipate that there will be a lot of really interesting and good bills to work on that we can support, that will help us live in a cleaner place and in a way that is more sustainable. So we have pretty robust teams in all of those states. But if you don't live in one of those states, that doesn't preclude you from working on these issues with us. So if this is something you're interested in, for sure, and reach out to me, I would love to talk to you about the potential for getting involved in any of these issues wherever you live. So I'm going to pass it now to Annie.
Hi, my name is Annie Waddoups, and I am the Director of Advocacy for Children and Families at MWEG. Some of you might be aware that this is a new area for MWEG, a new area of advocacy. And so this year we have been doing a lot of listening to our members and getting engaged with partners in this space, working on behalf of children and families. And as you might imagine, this is an area of advocacy that is an umbrella to cover a lot of policies and a lot of potential legislation. And so initially we wanted to decide where to focus our energies and your time and energy. And the two areas that we have especially paid attention to this year have been in the area of caring for the caregiver, and in the area of relieving child poverty and hunger. Now, both of those are very huge areas on their own, lots to do. But a few of the things and the ways that we've gotten engaged in those areas, in caring for the caregivers, one of the areas that we're interested in watching and that we feel like is gaining some traction is in paid family leave. As the old Mormon ad said, family, it's about time. And we do really feel like advocating for caregivers at both, and especially at both ends of life, at birth and when loved ones are nearing the end of their lives. It's important to support families so that all families can spend time together in those important ways. And so we're looking at some bills federally, and we have been participating in some conversations with the working group there. They actually the Washington Post yesterday just covered that initiative, and we've had the chance to be in the room with those leads of the federal policy that they're drafting. And then we're also watching some of the states are working on this. And so we are finding opportunities to weigh in and work on that and watching that carefully. Another area for caring for the caregivers is maternal health. And we have been active in state legislatures at the beginning of the year, helping our members advocate for expanding postpartum care so that it isn't covered just 12 weeks, which is the federal Medicaid amount, but that actually it would be extended for 12 months. As we know, a lot of caregivers, a lot of mothers after giving birth, not all of the follow-up that's needed happens in those first 12 weeks, that there's some really important things to follow and be covered into the first year. And so those are a few areas that we've been watching for caring for the caregiver and doing some active work in. And then on the relieving child poverty and hunger side, one of the mechanisms that we feel and was the first thing that we waded into as MWEG is the mechanism to help families get some money back in their pockets to address their needs in the ways that they need it is through the child tax credit. And so we have done we've done a call to action at the end of last year. It was almost exactly a year ago that we did that. Unfortunately, Congress did not decide to expand the child tax credit at that point. But at this time of this year, they're taking a look at some of the tax bill, and they're really getting serious about thinking about how to best serve and families, especially on the neediest end of the income scale. So we have had the opportunity to meet actually just yesterday with Senator Crapo in Idaho, and our chapter lead, Rebecca, arranged for some constituents to meet with them, and we had a wonderful meeting. Senator Crapo's in a really important role at the Senate Finance Committee, and so it felt like a very impactful way to speak up on behalf of families. So, and I'll just end by saying we in addition to those areas of caring for the caregivers and relieving child poverty and hunger, we really like, this is similar to what Cristie and Jessica have said, we like policies, in addition to being reactive, we like policies where we can be promotive and promotive of wellness and preventing problems from happening. And so that is another lens that we give to policy, and that we hope. There's a recent Urban Institute study that came out in the last month or so that said for every $1 spent on children and family policy, they gain $10 or prevent $10 of spending later. And so we feel like that's a really important message to send to our representatives. And what you can do is, if you're interested in joining us, that would be wonderful. But even just helping us tell your story of what life is like for families today. Legislators have various windows into life, and sometimes they're not aware of the struggles or of the assistance or the things that are helpful for families. So we really want to make that heard. And so, yes, reach out to me if you're interested in this area, and I will toss it now to Merinda, who is our Immigration Advocacy Director.
Hi. Thank you, Annie. And I would echo what Annie said about we have to be reactive, but we want to be proactive and encourage good legislation. I think it's really easy to get discouraged about government and think that we can't do much to move the needle. But in my experience, I've been doing this for over 2 years now. I can't believe it. We want things to happen right away, but I have seen incremental change happen, and building relationships with you as our members, but also with those that we vote for and who make decisions about our government. Those relationships are really powerful, and we see that incremental change happening. So year in review, here's some highlights for Shoulder to Shoulder, which is our immigration advocacy area at MWEG. I think it might be one of our oldest. Rachel, I don't know if that's true, but one of the first. This year, our main advocacy efforts have been focused actually for the last 2 years on the Afghan Adjustment Act. So if you've been around, you have probably heard us talking about this, but it's basically legislation. It has wide bipartisan support, wide public support. We just need the political will to pass it. We've done multiple calls to action. We have a current one going on right now. And I really like this one. We did one similar last year in which the call to action is a letter writing tool that allows you to first thank the legislators who are supporting the legislation, which I don't think our legislators often hear. They hear a lot of complaining. So I like that focus that we have. And then you can go back and write a letter to the legislators who aren't yet supporting it. You can see a list through that tool of your legislators, so you can figure it out. We'll put that link in the chat, both here and on the Facebook Live. And so as an outgrowth of that, you know, we've received hundreds of letters. We did a call to action for the Afghan Adjustment Act in June, and just released one last month around Thanksgiving. Maybe it was early this month. But what we do is we look at those letters and we find ones that we find particularly compelling, and we reach out to you and offer our op-ed writing lab, which is a really great resource to help you submit that letter. You know, you need to edit it a little bit to change the audience, but to submit that to your local newspaper. And that's a really important advocacy effort that we work on, and really empowering for women to realize that they can take their stories, take their passions, and get it out there for people to read, and people pay attention. We've done several of those this year. We also have organized at least 26 legislative meetings just this year with many of you. We feel fortunate as an advocacy group to have you well-spoken, well-informed constituents across the nation, so that when I'm in a coalition meeting, we're a member of this Evacuate Our Allies, which is a really great coalition of, gosh, I think 40 organizations across the nation who are advocating for the Afghan Adjustment Act. But often someone will say, oh, we need someone in Oklahoma we need some constituents in Oklahoma to go speak to the legislators and encourage them. We can find, well, Oklahoma might be a bit obscure. We don't have a lot of members there, but we know that we have members across the nation, and we can find members to go to these meetings, and we know that they will represent us well and represent their communities well, and the people who can't necessarily advocate for themselves. So I really enjoy doing those meetings. I actually have one right after this in Nebraska with Senator Ricketts' office, and that meeting will be attended by some MWEG members and also some Afghan Americans and some Afghan evacuees and other organizations. So that's a really great way that we get involved, and would love to have you as members participate in those. If your state has a chapter, reach out to your chapter lead and let them know that you want to be part of those legislative meetings, or you can reach out to me specifically if you're in a state that has less members. I mentioned Evacuate Our Allies. We are also members of the Alliance for a New Immigration Consensus. And that again is a large coalition that's just really trying to move the needle. It's been over 30 years since Congress has passed comprehensive immigration reform, and it's long overdue. And like I said, it can be discouraging, and it might seem like we'll never get there, but it's heartening for me to go to these meetings with super smart, compassionate people who have good ideas and are willing to engage and advocate, and we work together to make that happen. Just look at my notes, remember what else. Oh, we also this year have entered more into advocacy on a state chapter level, specifically this year in Idaho, Texas, and Florida. And we would love to, I think some in Arizona, but would love to expand those efforts. So if you, as chapter leaders or just members in your state, if you become aware of legislation that is either really good for immigration, is compassionate and pragmatic, we would love to hear about it. Would love to help you advocate for that legislation. By the same token, if you see things that are alarming, or if you're just not sure, sometimes legislation can be deceiving until you look into it. Would love to help you engage on that. And there's a lot of different ways to engage. In some cases, we just give you the tools to engage on a personal level, but sometimes we want to engage on an institutional level when we have the resources and see that it is strategically a good idea for us. So that's highlights from this year. Just want to mention a couple things this year that we're excited about. We are planning to do a border trip in 2024. Will be attended by definitely by MWEG leaders, but we may open that up to the larger MWEG population. And if not, we'll keep you apprised of what we learn and what we do there. We want to pass the Afghan Adjustment Act. We're also planning to have 1 month be focused on immigration for our book group. We are hoping to do some living room conversations focused on immigration, because the rhetoric can be deceiving and divisive, and we'd like to change the narrative in small ways in our communities and in large ways as well. So those are just a few things. I encourage you to reach out to me if you'd like to get involved. We have an awesome committee that meets every other week, and different levels of time commitment there, but would love to have you be involved with our work in Shoulder to Shoulder. And I'll pass it to Dorie.
Hi, my name is Dorie Kim. I am with Utah Rooting Out Racism. Our advocacy director, Cheryl Ellsworth, wasn't able to make it, so I'm standing in for her today. So this branch, I guess, of MWEG is focused on rooting out racism. And right now we're specifically focused in the Utah area. What I love hearing about everyone that's spoken so far and the advocacy directors is that everything that they've spoken about ties back to rooting out racism. It affects a lot of these, every one of these things that was spoken about affects marginalized people, specifically communities of color, at really high rates. So it's really encouraging for me to hear that all this work is happening, and that, you know, all of this work together is really helping the communities of color, everyone else too, but especially those vulnerable populations. So Utah, we call it UROAR for short. So I'm used to calling it UROAR. It's Utah Rooting Out Racism. Our goal is to focus on racial equity within the schools in Utah. We used to be known as Utah Educational Equity Coalition, but we have since, it was more focused on equity in general. We've since laser focused that on racial equity in schools, because we saw that there was a lack of that kind of advocacy work. And so that's what we're focused on right now. We just relaunched in August, and August 31st. So we're still kind of new. We're in the building stages of this, but we've been able to do some really cool things. We have a BIPOC-led steering committee, and so they are telling us what we need to be doing, what our focuses are, and our steering committee is comprised of educators, researchers, parents, community members. We've got a pretty good representation within that steering committee. We have three purposes at UROAR. They are to illuminate, empower, and influence. So for illuminating, we want to create and disseminate accurate information about the realities of racism in Utah, and how that relates to our schools. And so one way that we've been focusing on that is through our Instagram account. So you can follow us at Utah Roar. It's UTAHROR on Instagram. We've got some really good educational content up there that we've been focusing on. So some things that we've been focusing on is racial bullying, and the effects of racial bullying, how to support your child through racial bullying on an emotional level, as well as in the administrative role of like who to contact, what to say, those kinds of things. We've also we're focusing on some racial slurs that are happening a lot in our schools that we're hearing about. So we have a series about the N-word. Let's talk about the N-word. What does it mean? What's the historical context of the N-word? And so I'm really, really happy with the educational content that we've been able to put out so far. So follow us on Instagram. That's where we are mainly for now. We also aim to empower. So we want to build capacity and organize supporters of every race, culture, religion, every background. We want everybody in Utah to come together and advocate for rooting out racism in our schools. It has become a divisive topic, but it shouldn't be. It's just caring for one another, right? So one of the ways that we have been working on empowering our Utah is we've partnered with Unify, and we're so grateful for that partnership with them. They have the ability and the expertise in educating people on how to mobilize. And so in 2023, we've had 2 trainings so far. And in 2024, we actually plan to have pretty much monthly trainings through Unify. And so we're really grateful for that, for them and the partnership with them. We have also, our last purpose is to influence. So that's how do we influence people in power that are making these decisions, like the Utah State Board of Education, local school boards, the legislature. How do we work with teachers and other people within the classroom to have more equitable practices and policies? And one of the things that we're really focusing on right now is advocating for racial equity and strong policies regarding racial bullying, harassment, and discrimination, to be more specific and cover more things that it had before. Usually racial bullying policies don't really specify race, but that has become a really big issue in Utah, as highlighted by recent investigations for one particular school district. So we look forward to getting in the school districts and advocating for these better policies that will protect our students. And in the future, what we would like to do is work more with the USBE, the Utah State Board of Education, and our legislators to advocate, like everyone else here has really emphasized, better policy, right? Because those policies, that's a really strong way to make sure that things are happening. And so we invite you to join us. We have our trainings every month. You can look on our Utah Roar Instagram account. In our link tree, we've got the trainings and we've got resources and things like that. So I'm really grateful to be here. I'm grateful for all of the work of all of our advocacy directors and their teams and MWEG. And I'm just really excited for all of these branches and all the work that everyone's doing.
Great. Thank you so much to each of you for giving us an update on the areas where each of you are working. And Dorie, thank you for filling in today. This is an important, you know, when MWEG talks about our principles and what we are, this is our proactive arm of MWEG, of being out there and being in the community and doing good. And so each of these areas of advocacy, if you are interested, I've put links to our website in the discussion group. So you can go there and you can see how each area operates. And then there's also a link to UROAR's website and then also their Instagram handle. So you can follow them and keep up with them. If you are interested in volunteering with any of these groups, you can reach out to them. And if you want to email them, Merinda had said, if you're interested, email. You can find emails for each of these people through the MWEG website or through UROAR website. So again, so thankful for Jessica and Annie and Cristie and Dorie and Merinda for joining me today and giving us an update. And we look forward to 2024. It's gonna be wild, right? But it's gonna. I think. We're all heading in a good direction and we're all just looking for things that are good and for our communities and for our nation. So thank you again. This will be our last grow of 2023. So thank you for ending it on such a great high note. And we look forward to seeing you all back in January. So have a good day.